Welcome to our nation state dialogue. राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आपका स्वागत है. 欢迎收看民族国家对话系列. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochar, moderator for today's discussion. Today it's our pleasure to have with us Mr. Jayadeva Ranade. Though he needs no introduction, many of us know him very well, and he's the best China expert I could have on my channel. But anyway, just to give a brief introduction about him, Jayadeva Ranade is a member of the National Security Advisory Board and the president of the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. He's also a member of the core group on China of the Indian Council of World Affairs and distinguished fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi. He retired as Additional Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat, Government of India in August 2008. And he has over 45 years of experience analyzing developments relating to China, Tibet, and even East Asia. His foreign assignments include Hong Kong, Beijing, and of course, as a minister in Washington, D.C. He earned a Diploma of Advanced Proficiency in Chinese after a 2-year study program in Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and completed an intensive introductory course in Mandarin and a diploma in Mandarin from the University of Hong Kong. Mr. Ranade is the author of many books like China Unveiled, Insights into Chinese Strategic Thinking, which was published in 2013, Cadres of Tibet, which was published in 2018, Xi Jinping's China, which was published in 2017, and his latest work is Xi Jinping China's Third New Era, which was just published last year end. He contributes to many mainstream national newspapers, magazines, leading publications, and it is invited to television debates, seminars, and conferences, and I can go on and on giving his introduction. But anyway, welcome to our channel, sir.
Thank you very much, Geeta, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let me just begin with the very broad, question, which everyone is really interested to know. How do you see the current India-China relationship, and what has changed after President Xi Jinping has come to power?
Let me split that into two parts. Firstly, I think that the relationship today is at a critical point. We have to, I think, have a fresh look, and I underline fresh. Look at our policy towards China all these years and figure out what we need to change. Secondly, I think China will realize in the time to come that it has made a strategic miscalculation by carrying out the military operations and intrusions that it did in April 2022 against us at a time when it has a much larger ambition of challenging the United States and trying to overtake it. That will catch up with China in course of time, I'm sure. But in any case, it has picked fights with all the neighbors. And it's at a situation today where there is internal dissatisfaction along with this. So I think they have a difficult path to really follow. But as far as Xi Jinping's arrival on the scene, I think 2-3 points that I would like to put forward. The first is he came to power, or he was appointed as General Secretary of the party, as President of China and Chairman of the Military Commission, all at the same time, which has not happened for the last 35 years. The last person was Wang Feng, who held all these posts. But it happened after a year of political turmoil or turbulence in China, where we saw a struggle going on between Ho Xilai and Xi Jinping. And of course, subsequently, we get to learn that Chow Yun-kang and others were also involved. But whatever, at that time, a number of things became clear to the party center, including the fact that they had been penetrated, as was brought out by the fact that the police chief of Chongqing, that is Ho Xilai's police chief, in fact, Wang Lichun, he obviously had some connections with the Americans, because he went to the US Consulate General in Chengdu instead of going to the British outpost in Chongqing itself. So there are all these indicators, and I think the party center at that time decided to make him the leader and gave him basically a free hand in ensuring the party's supremacy and premier position in China, in ensuring that the party ideology remained supreme and was embedded among the people, and of course, in pulling up the Chinese system by cleansing it. And he single-mindedly went about doing all this. And in the process, also, of course, he began aggrandizing himself. But I think these are the, shall I say, the building blocks on which he proceeded. And as far as his national ambitions were concerned, of course, as he said, rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation was one of his premier tasks, which means recovering, and I put that in quotes, territories lost through the imposition of unequal treaties by hostile foreign powers, which brings them to collision with India, with Japan, with Vietnam, etc.
I mean, though you've already said, that President Xi Jinping had some miscalculation done, but I mean, I'm just going a little deep into that, in the sense, like, Prime Minister Modi began his tenure extending an olive branch to China by engaging in Wuhan spirit, and then this was Mambalapuram summit and all of that. So what and where did the Indian side go wrong in its engagement with China, or in understanding how the Chinese would react?
I think we have consistently followed a policy of what we said was not provoking China, was reaching out a hand of friendship, etc. It works up to a point. But when you figure out your adversary, you've got to understand what really, needs to be done. I mean, with China, this policy obviously didn't work. They interpreted it as a policy of appeasement, as a policy of weakness. And this I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about from the 50s, if you look at it. That's what's been happening from the time when they took over Tibet, from the time that we backed out of Tibet, etc. So at every stage, we didn't make our position clear. We didn't stand up for what our interests were. Secondly, once Prime Minister Modi took over, he certainly did, as you correctly pointed out, he did reach out to the Chinese repeatedly. And I think it was based on his understanding, or whatever advice he was given, that we can, have maybe a good relationship with them built on commerce. And but Xi Jinping had his own ideas. As I said, his main agenda was rejuvenation, apart from the domination of the party, etc. And for that rejuvenation, he had to take back certain territories. And secondly, he had to make China strong, for which he needed certain aspects, like, for example, I would say that, the POK area, etc. He did need to control that. So these were his interests. And I'm afraid, this Wuhan and Mamlapura, people do look at it as, major meetings, and they ask the question, as you rightly said, what went wrong? I think, frankly, if you read what I had written at that time on both these, I'd said that these are non-starters. And Mamlapura, in fact, made it very clear, made Xi Jinping's intentions very clear, and his unhappiness with India, the way he went off to Nepal directly and made certain statements. So I think I put it down really to the Chinese policy of deception, and we fell for it.
I think even before Mambalapuram happened, I mean, we knew that the Kashmir issue became something very significant. So how much do you see the Pakistan factor influencing the current Indo-China equation?
Well, it's certainly there. Pakistanis are not going to put in a good word for us, that's for certain. But I think Pakistan now today is a minor factor in this. What we are seeing today, to my mind, is Chinese power across our northern borders, and Chinese power spreading over our northern borders into the west, into Pakistan. So we have today Chinese infrastructure in POK, PJK, etc. I mean, in so-called POK, Gilgit, Pakistan. We have Chinese projects coming up there. We have the Western Theatre Command having an interest there, as per its mandate. which is to protect Chinese investments and people. And we have military officers from the PLA and the Pakistan Army posted in each other's operations divisions in their respective headquarters. So you have a Pakistani colonel. I don't know whether there has been now a more senior man, but a colonel posted in the Joint Staff Department of the PLA. And you have a senior colonel of the PLA posted in the GHQ in Rawalpindi. So this certainly points to very close military collaboration. And apart from that, of course, the two have been having exercises where the Chinese are learning from the Pakistanis what our fighting techniques and tactics are, etc. So I think the Chinese would not want Pakistan to precipitate matters unless they're ready for it, unless the Chinese are ready for it. So I think to that extent, the Pakistanis play a minor role. But as I said, they will be keeping on instigating the Chinese against us.
But one of the very critical issue that comes out with the problems about India-China relations, apart from what we were having in terms of economic and trade relations, is the border problem. And last year, we saw a lot of disengagement happening. There were understandings of creating buffer zones and things like that on some areas. And we were hearing at that point of time, only 2 areas are left to be decided. So what problems do you think persist on the border resolution, and what is the way forward that we can look at?
I will make one opening remark in response to your question. Firstly, can we trust the Chinese? I mean, they have violated every agreement and understanding that we have reached. So to my mind, we are starting from ground zero. Secondly, the Chinese are the ones who have come in to the places which we are now negotiating. So they're already there. And I don't think they have withdrawn from everywhere. There may be 1 or 2 points they have backed off. There also, they have created or they have recommended buffer zones, which is actually within our territory, they are recommending buffer zones. I don't say that means going back to their previous positions. So while our diplomats certainly, because that is their remit, they will continue to push for a peaceful negotiation. I don't see any signs of this. And let's not forget that the day Galwan happened, 15th of June, that day, Wang Yi reiterated publicly that Ladakh is a part of China. He said, this is our territory. And so did the spokesman of the Western Theatre Command. So I frankly do not see them withdrawing to their positions where they were in April. I also see a lot of defense infrastructure build-up taking place in Tibet. Number of airports coming up. As you know, about 30 airports by 2025. So they're really moving at full speed. Plus airports at the mouth of the Karakoram, the Tashkent airport. So these are not signs which indicate a peaceful kind of posture vis-a-vis us. These are signs which if I want to be very charitable, I would say they're preparing for some misadventure by us, which our track record shows we are not going to do. But on the other hand, they could be preparing for something more against us. But I think this time we will be prepared.
Yeah. But when I had certain discussions with the Chinese on this border issue, one of the things which the Chinese were putting forward, apart from what is already there in the public media, and I'm not talking about that, is that even if India-China border problem is resolved, still an India-Tibet issue would remain to be settled, which I was really surprised to hear from them. I mean, what do you mean by India-Tibet problem? It's the border problem that you have created. And if you think that Tibet is your part, then it should be an India-China problem. But having said that, I think what they mean is the status of Tibetans and the future of Dalai Lama. So how do you see this, and what is your perception of the possible outcomes? Because you have also worked a lot on Tibet, and I know that you have published books as well. So how do you see that as an engagement coming up?
You are right. Actually, they have started raising the Dalai Lama issue again. And in 2 recent contacts, they did mention the Dalai Lama, which was a new thing, I mean, to bring it up. Border, of course, is an issue. And I think by raising it, what they're really pointing to is the fact that they do not want us to recognize a Dalai Lama whom they don't recognize. I mean, they don't want a situation of two Dalai Lamas, like they have already of two Pancha Lamas. So that is what they're trying to say. And at that point, when the transition is about to take place or when the situation arises, now they will start labeling the central Tibetan administration, this is my view, of course, as a, shall I say, a rebel group that we have given shelter to. That is what they will say. But actually, they are just, like any NGO looking after their own interest. So this will be certainly it will be a rub, because we don't know what stance the new reincarnation will take, whether he will continue Dalai Lama's policies or not. And I suspect he will. So that will be a problem for the Chinese. And it will be a problem which they will create for us. There's no doubt. But I'd invite your attention in this context to a fairly detailed article written by a gentleman from the Chinese Institute of Contemporary International Relations, which, as you know, is a think tank under the Ministry of State Security. A person who called Hu Shashank, who is the director for South Asia. And he has also said almost the same thing, that the border issue is a problem, but it's not the main problem. He said the main problem is India's rise and its effort at garnering influence, which is what is our problem. We cannot have an India which is rising and which is becoming more influential. So he's put it fairly candidly that India's rise is the problem. And he even puts a date. He puts 2014 as the date from which the rise started, which is also incidentally the date when the present government came to power for the first time.
Right. I also heard from some of the Chinese saying that, India's rise itself is a problem, because when there would be two major powers would be rising, and especially when India is also talking about making India, something parallel to made in China and all of that, there is definitely going to be friction between the two major powers, which are going to be expanding very fast. I mean, in terms of their population, they're expanding. In terms of their exports, they will expand. Economy will also grow. So definitely that tussle is going to be there. But having said that, I mean, I'm just going back to, the border incident that you just mentioned about the Galwan incident in June. I mean, what lessons you think we can draw from this Galwan incident and about China's action and psyche? I mean, you have said that we cannot trust, but in the sense beyond, I mean, the trust was always a problem with the Chinese. From after 62 onwards, we knew that there is a lack of trust. We were trying to rebuild that, with all confidence building measures and things like that. But beyond that, what is that we can understand for the Chinese psyche, and not just specifically of Xi Jinping and their actions that, tell us about our future as well?
I think, just to differ slightly, I think we lulled ourselves also into a sense of complacency, thinking that the relations with China are okay. So I don't agree that, there was an element of distrust with the Chinese. Yes, to some extent. But by and large, we thought they were okay and, our relations are proceeding, which is the fundamental mistake that we made. We also forgot what Mao said, that there can only be one tiger on the mountaintop. And he was talking precisely about this situation. I think it was on contradiction in one of his essays. Whereas we were talking about, the world is big enough for us all, which phrase has come back into circulation again, which is again a mistake, because they don't believe in that. They made it very clear, even when they're taking on the United States. They're basically saying the two of us can talk, and then at the same time they're saying, we are going to offer a whole lot of things, civilization and governance and everything else, as a counter to the Americans. So there is going to be that problem with them. As far as lessons that we need to draw, I think we need to be very clear in our mind that we have to start from ground zero. That means absent trust, no trust. I think our armed forces have to understand that. So all this thought that, we can make friends with the Chinese, or the Chinese smiled at me and took a photograph, all that kind of thing has to disappear. Their very lethal adversaries, and we have to keep that in mind. Secondly, our commercial trade with, our commercial contacts with China, I think we have to control that. We cannot afford to have a trade which is burgeoning, and at a time when we have this situation where they've actually undertaken an aggression against us. So we have to control trade. Non-essential items have to be curbed in the first instance. And as far as vital products are concerned, we have to become self-reliant. This government has taken a few steps in that direction. It will take more time, but I think that is the way to go. And the rest of the government has to join hands and see that that process accelerates. I think then we can become more, in a better position to take on the challenge. And the third, which we are already doing, is strengthening our partnerships with other countries and making clear our position that we want freedom of navigation as far as the high seas are concerned. Sea lanes have to be neutral, and making it very clear to the Chinese that we will, partner with others if when the circumstances warrant. And it's become very, very clear, I think, to the Chinese that why we are doing the partnering. We may not say it in so many words, but certainly. And finally, I would say that our position in domestic matters must be made more clear. I mean, if the Dalai Lama is here, I see no reason why we have to be shy about it. When our leaders go and visit Arunachal Pradesh, so what? I mean, they should go. And we should not tolerate the Chinese actions like issuing stapled visas for J&K and stapled visas for Arunachal. We have to take a stand on that. And taking a stand doesn't mean that we're looking for a fight or that we are wanting to provoke them. We are just saying that this is our position. Accept it. So I think we have to take these steps in order to, shall I say, improve their understanding of what India is about and where we are headed. And secondly, of how we will strengthen ourselves and make ourselves more self-reliant instead of being dependent on the Chinese. And let me conclude with just one point. These APIs, etc., for medicines, we used to manufacture them in India. And because they were slightly cheaper in China, we began importing it from there. And we lost our, we lost that industry. Now we are starting to rebuild it. Those kind of things, I think government should have stepped in. And government should have been monitoring it, which I hope it starts doing now.
But I mean, I'm just pushing a little beyond this thing in terms of, the reciprocity of things. In bilateral relations, we really need to understand how the other side acts, and so we react to it. But of late, I mean, we have heard that, China has just come out with law on foreign relations, which is also something relating to, how it is going to treat. Of course, it is directly related to US, not to India. But in some sense, it will have some repercussion for India and its neighbors, especially in terms of South China Sea, where we have already taken a position. We have started to, support the Philippines and things like that. Will that also affect our relations with China in the sense if they are going to be a little more rigid about how they are going to, negotiate with India and how their policies would be for India? And so in that situation, how is India going to be, acting on?
See, this foreign relations law, of course, there are many points in that, but as you said, yes, it will be applicable to everyone. I mean, with US being the main target, they will also look at the WTO, etc. But other countries which have trading relations with them will also be affected or not affected as it is. But the potential for their being affected is there. Secondly, the Chinese are very pragmatic people. So even if they can use the law against someone, but if it's beneficial to them, they will not. And when it is not beneficial to them, they will do something. And I would say that we need to look at that along with the espionage law that they brought in, which is again very wide in scope. So even a businessman can be hauled up. So they've basically made all these against what they call are the sanctions and the long arm interference by other countries. So while that may be an excuse, but they also said a whole lot of other things. That China stands for peace, China stands for, respect to the neighbor's territory, etc. Well, what have they done with us? What have they done with the Vietnamese? Chinese? What do they learn with the Japanese? So I think we need to look at it for what it is. It's a self-serving kind of law that has been brought out, mainly for public purposes and domestically, so that it shows, one, that the party controls foreign policy, because that foreign relations law was actually mooted by the party. And secondly, that they can impose penalties, etc., where they require on all entities operating in China.
Okay, so just last question to you, and that is very crucial again. We have talked about Pakistan, Tibet, and all of that border problem. I think Taiwan is one issue which is very crucial when we talk about China and its future. When you talk about Chinese rejuvenation of Chinese nation, Taiwan is one thing which will definitely be a part of it. So in your understanding, what is the possibility of President Xi Jinping's utterances on the issue of Taiwan, and how that will proceed, and what would be India's stand on that?
I think Taiwan, as you rightly pointed out, is a major issue for them. It will mark, it will put Xi Jinping at a different level if he begins the reunification, which is, I think, one reason why he will be sorely tempted to do it. What is holding him back is that he is not clear on what the United States will do, whether they will intervene if he does something with Taiwan. So I think that is one major point for him. Otherwise, he certainly would. Second is, that he's at the moment trying different methodologies. I mean, I think United Front activity in Taiwan has been stepped up. Prior to the elections, they're trying to support the KMT against the UP. They have again permitted the import of sweet apples from Taiwan, which they had blocked just last week, because, as they say, two Taiwanese legislatures had made the recommendations, KMT again. So they're doing all that. But at the same time, they're building up their military preparations. And I think it is quite possible that they might try a swift, quick grab for one of the smaller islands like Matsui, Quemoy, etc., which are just off the shore line, obviously, off the coast. They might try a quick grab there. And then Xi Jinping projects that as the start of the reunification, which he alone has been able to do. So I think these are possibilities. And but there could be consequences for China. It could be hit by sanctions, which will hurt it much, much more than sanctions have hit Russia. It will hit them psychologically, it will hit them economically, and they will be in a fairly bad shape. The party cadres themselves may, the dissatisfaction among them may come to a boil, because already many people are blaming Xi Jinping for the deterioration of Sino-US relations. If sanctions come along, these guys will probably tell Xi Jinping that he's gone too far, better if he steps down, because many of their kids are studying there. Many of them have their money salted away there, and they don't want that kind of situation. So I think Taiwan is the major issue, but there are all these factors there. And if I may just, in conclusion, say that the basic issue here is the contest for being number one between the US and China. And I think if the Americans, who have walked around like the number one for so many 200 years or whatever, if they are content being dictated to by the Chinese, then it's a different matter. But I don't think that will happen. And so there will be a contest, and in which case the window for really settling this issue is shrinking. I don't think it's going to be more than about 3 odd years before they have to take a call. And similarly for Xi Jinping, the dissatisfaction within China is high. And if he's not able to get the economy going, and there are no signs of it so far, then he also has a short window, a shrinking window, in which to do something. So that, of course, raises our concerns too, because he could attempt something here. So there are many issues that will come up at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you rightly said, you know, Xi Jinping is going to not just face challenges from neighboring countries and US, but domestically also economy is not really going well, and there are challenges which is Xi Jinping is facing. And I think he will take into consideration all of these before, you know, even acting against India. I mean, you can think about aggression on the border, but in the sense, how would you sustain that as well? I mean, there may be, you know, repercussions within the party by the PLA or by other people as well, but what we saw in Russia as well. So with all that word, I mean, it's sort of a short, you know, this thing, we want a crisp for our, you know, listeners. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and hope we continue our interactions. To our viewers, please keep, you know, hit the like icon and subscribe to our channel for many more interesting, you know, discussions on China and other issues. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Geeta.